Hey everyone, Dr. P here. So today, we're not going to just memorize a bunch of boring anatomical terms. No way! We're actually going to learn a whole new language. A language that lets us see, and I mean really see, what's happening inside our bodies when we move. By the end of this, you won't just be doing the exercises, you'll be able to read them. All right, let's dive in. So let's start with a question. Think about a spine twist. We can say, I'm twisting my spine, but what does that really mean? In a way that's precise and analytical, our everyday words, they're just kind of vague. To get from just doing an exercise to truly mastering it, we need a whole lot more clarity. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to build a foundational framework, a universal language of anatomy that lets us describe any movement anywhere with perfect precision. Honestly, it's the key to unlocking a much deeper level of your practice.
So here's our roadmap for becoming fluent. First, we'll nail down the alphabet's starting point. Then we'll explore the maps where all this movement gets written down. After that, we'll get into the real action words, the core verbs of movement. And finally, we'll put it all together so you can see the story your body is telling.
Okay, first things first. Before we can even begin to describe where something is going, we all have to agree on where it's starting from, right? Well, in the world of anatomy, there is one universal starting line. And this is it, the anatomical position. I want you to think of this as the letter A in our brand new alphabet. Every single term we use, up, down, forward, backward, every single one is defined from this exact stance. It's our absolute, non-negotiable reference point. Let's break this down real quick. You're standing upright, feet are together or just slightly apart, and you're looking straight ahead. Simple enough. But here is the one detail that everyone forgets, and it's the most important one. Notice the palms are facing forward. This little detail completely changes how we define the rotation of our arms. It's absolutely key. And here's a little pro tip, a bulk tip, as we say, that honestly trips up a lot of people. In Pilates, we are absolutely obsessed with finding our neutral spine, and that's great. But, and this is a big but, when we're using the universal language of anatomy, we have to remember that all the official definitions go back to the anatomical position, not our Pilates neutral. It's a really critical distinction. All right, so we have our starting point. Now I want you to imagine that our body is intersected by three giant invisible panes of glass. These are our maps of movement, and we call them planes. Basically, every single movement we make can be mapped onto one of these planes. And here they are, our three maps. We've got the sagittal plane, which slices us neatly into a left half and a right half. Then there's the coronal plane, dividing us into a front and a back, and finally the transverse plane, which cuts right across our top and bottom. Go ahead and take a second to connect each plane with its little analogy there on the slide. These simple images are going to be your best friend. Now, if movement happens on these planes, kind of like writing on a page, what allows that movement to happen? Well, that's where the axis comes in. The best way to think of an axis is like the spine of a book. It's what allows the pages, or in our case, the planes, to turn. And this brings us to the golden rule of biomechanics. It's this perfect, beautiful partnership. The axis of rotation is always perpendicular to the plane of movement. Seriously, if you remember just one thing from today, make it this. This is the key that makes everything else just click into place. So let's see this partnership in action. When you move forward or backward, and that's in the sagittal plane, you pivot around the medial lateral axis. Just picture a wheel spinning on its axle. Now, when you move side to side in the coronal plane, you're moving around the anteroposterior axis, exactly like a door swinging on its hinges. And for all those juicy twists in the transverse plane, we rotate around the vertical axis, just like a barbecue skewer. See how those visuals make it all feel so much more real? So we've set up the grammar of our new language, right? We have the starting point, the planes, the axes. Now it's time for the action words, the verbs that actually describe what the heck the body's doing. So in that sagittal plane, our main verbs are flexion and extension. Flexion is pretty simple. It's when you decrease the angle of a joint, like when you curl forward in a roll-up. Extension is just the opposite. You're increasing the angle, like when you're arching your back in a beautiful swan. They're a perfect pair. Okay, let's switch over to the coronal plane. Here, we've got abduction, which just means moving a limb away from the center of your body. Think about lifting your leg up in a side kick. Its partner is adduction. Think adding it back toward the midline, like when you squeeze a magic circle between your thighs. And finally, rotation. The best way to get this is with the spinning top principle. First, you have to establish a long, stable vertical axis. That's the core of the top. Then, the body just spins around this central axis. And where does all this spinning happen? On the flat surface of the transverse plane. Simple as that. And that rotation, it can go in two directions. If you rotate a limb inward toward the body's center line, we call that internal or medial rotation. And if you rotate it outward, away from the midline, that's external or lateral rotation. Okay, we've learned the nouns, the grammar, and the verbs. Now it's time to write our very first sentence. Let's put this all together and make the invisible totally visible. So here's our whole system in action. We always start from that anatomical position, then we identify the plane, then the axis, and finally we name the action with its precise verb. It's really just a simple 4-step process to decode pretty much any movement you can think of. So let's go all the way back to the very first question I asked you. With this new language under our belts, we can finally give a precise, really meaningful answer. What is actually happening during a spine twist? And here it is, the big reveal. A spine twist is not just a twist, it is the rotation of the spine, which is happening in the transverse plane, and it's moving around the vertical axis. Boom, rotation, transverse plane, vertical axis. See, that's the language. It's clean, it's precise, and it is so, so powerful. And that, right there, is the power of this language. You've just been given a whole new lens. You're no longer just a participant in movement. You are now its analyst. You can look at any exercise, in the studio, at the gym, just in your daily life, and not just do it, you can read it. So the only question left is, what are you going to go read first?